has interfered with something even more important than getting done what she had to get done. And that is, it's the first point of this text, or the first one I take from it. It's implied more than explicit, and that is that you can find God, whether you're in the front room or the kitchen, you can find God wherever you are and whatever you're doing. And then in this story it's attached to a warning, which is sometimes your commitment to what you're doing can distract you from things that are important, maybe even from God. You know, in the fourth gospel, the Gospel of John, Martha appears again in an incident which again involves her sister, Mary, but this time her brother Lazarus, too. And in this other story, Lazarus is critically ill. And so Mary and Martha, they send word to Jesus, come, we need your help. But before Jesus arrives, Lazarus dies. So by the time Jesus gets there, 4 days later, Martha's home is filled with mourners. But Martha spots Jesus coming down the road, and she runs down the road to meet him, but she doesn't just welcome him, she confronts him. Where in the world have you been? She says. And what were you thinking, and what were you doing if you'd arrived earlier? Well, maybe my brother Lazarus might not have died. And then right there on the road, they have a conversation about death and resurrection. And Martha says, I believe he will rise again on the last day. But then Jesus adds a defining Christian word in that story. He says, I am the resurrection. I am the life. And those who believe in me, even though they die, they will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. For 2,000 years, Christians have heard those words as comfort in the face of overwhelming grief. Every day for 2,000 years, and that includes this coming Friday, when we will gather to remember and give thanks for Al Bingham. Every day for 2,000 years, Christians have heard comfort in that promise. And on Friday, somebody will stand up here and remind the community gathered here that Jesus said, I am the resurrection, and I am the life. Anyway, in the story from which the words come, Jesus presses Martha. Do you believe that, Martha? He asks. And standing there in the midst of a dusty road, in the middle of her impatience and impertinence, and her confronting Jesus, Martha confesses, yes, Lord, I believe you are the Messiah, the one coming into the world. And the point there is that it's Martha, not Mary, it's Martha. Pushy Martha, assertive Martha, demanding Martha, who gets to the heart of the matter. And when Mary finally joins them, all she does is once again throw herself at Jesus' feet and weep there. Do you understand? Martha is not a woman who keeps silent. She speaks her mind. Nor does she leave theology to the theologians or to the men. Nor does she throw herself at Jesus' feet, as Mary did. Minutes later, she doesn't give in. She struggles with God just as Job did. She charges Jesus with failure, and he's not offended. She wrestles with God just as Jacob wrestled with God, and in the process she offers us all a model of what it can mean. One way a follower of Jesus. Well, anyway, back to the text. I think the story of Martha remaining in the kitchen while Jesus is in the living room suggests that doing everyday mundane work, not just sitting in church or figuratively sitting at Jesus' feet and listening to his words, but in the doing everyday mundane work is one way, one place where we can meet God. You know, Kathleen Norris, who was here in 1997 when General Assembly came to Syracuse. Kathleen Norris came and she talked about some of her books. And one of the things that she talks about, I don't remember if she talked about it then, but one of the things she talks about is where and when she feels close to God. She says it's not when she's in worship or not in prayer, it's when she's doing laundry or when she's baking bread. And she writes this about that. She says, we want life to have meaning, we want fulfillment, healing, even ecstasy, but the human paradox is that we find these things by starting where we are, not where we wish we were. We must, she says, look for blessings to come from unlikely, everyday places. She's not the only one who talks like this. John Buchanan, pastor emeritus of Fourth Presbyterian Church in Chicago and the editor of the Christian Century, he confesses similar things. He says, apart from the prayers of the people when I feel close to God in worship, the times I feel closest are when I take walks early in the morning or when I'm on my hands and feet in my garden pulling weeds. Work. And he explains all this by quoting a man named Brother Lawrence, who once upon a time wrote a spiritual classic called Practicing the Presence of God. And Lawrence says the same thing. He says, I never have felt particularly close to God while sitting in the chapel with my eyes shut trying to pray. I do, however, feel close to God in the kitchen, preparing meals for the other monks. It's when I'm working with my pots and pans that I feel the presence of God and that I pray for real. All these people make the point that we dealt with earlier, that I mentioned earlier. And that point is that you can find God wherever you are and whatever you're doing. But, and this text is a warning of that, whatever we are doing and our commitment to that, our busyness with one task or another collection of tasks, are trying to do too much. Maybe that's the way to put it. Are trying to do too much can not only distract us from the pleasure of good and God-filled activity and effort, it can also dull our awareness to things even more important. And that means even our awareness of God. That's what happened to Martha one day when Jesus came to visit. And when it happened to her, Jesus was there to speak her name gently, lovingly, to calm her down, to reassure her, to soothe her. Let's be honest, Martha's not the only one this happens to. It happens to you and me too. And when it does, maybe we can be for each other little Christs, okay? Maybe we can be little Christs for one another and remind each other, pay attention. Don't let anything distract you. Don't miss out on love. Don't miss any of the important things just because you're busy and you're working. And most of all, do not miss God. Let's continue our worship with our gifts, our offerings.